Hi, this is Heather. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to paint fur. I have a bunny that I drew in chalk right here. I like to use chalk, just basic white chalk, because then if you mess up you can just wipe it right out. And it's not permanent, so when you're done with your painting, the next day you could just wipe it off with a wet paper towel if there's any left over. So I'm going to paint my bunny in with brown and white. I have some brown and white paint here. The paint that I'm using is Liquitex Basics Raw Sienna. And then for the white, I'm using the Acrylic Titanium White. Okay, so the main thing to know when you're painting fur is it's just going to be a bunch of lines. Whatever color you want your fur to be, you just want to do lines of dark and light values of that color. And then we're also going to add some little fur coming off the sides too, just to make him look extra furry. There's a couple different ways that you can do the fur. When I'm doing small areas, then I'll usually just use like a number 5 round brush. And when I'm doing bigger areas, I'll use a flat brush. So I'll show you both methods. I'm going to start with the number 5 round brush. And I'm going to get like a medium color for the fur, so if I'm doing brown, I'm just going to get a little bit of white and a little bit of brown and mix them together. If I use just the brown, it's going to be a little too see-through at first. It's not completely opaque, so that's why I like to mix a little bit of white with it. I'm going to start by just doing a base coat on his body where I want the brown to be. So this doesn't look like fur yet, it's just a solid color. I want him to be kind of white with brown splotches, so I'm going to do a nice big brown part right here on the back. After I have that done, I don't really need to rinse my brush, but I'll just take my brush and just wipe the extra paint off on my paper towel. And I'm going to get a little bit of white on my brush. And notice how my bristles are actually flat, or if I just twist the brush on the plate, then they can be kind of more at a point, and you can just experiment to see what works best for you. But I'm going to take this white and I'm just going to do some small little lines here, and notice how I'm leaving spaces between the lines. So you don't want to do the lines right next to each other, because then it's just going to end up being a big block of white. You want to do them kind of far away from each other, so you have space between them. And you don't want to blend it too much. So after you put the line on there, either leave it or maybe just brush over it just once. And the direction of your brush strokes matters too. You want your brush strokes to always be in the direction that the fur would be going. So on the back, the fur is going down like this, and then on the leg, like this little part of fur right here is going to be going this way. Okay. And at this point now we can just let that dry so that we can add another coat. This is just our base coat. So it's not going to be super furry, but we're just kind of laying the groundwork. Next I'm going to do some white right here. When you're doing white fur, you just want your different values to be white and then a little bit of gray, or in this case I'm going to use just a very light brown for the shading, just to kind of keep the colors consistent. So I'm going to get some white on my brush and I'm going to do that base color. I'm avoiding the leg and the foot, so I'm going to do that separately. So right now I'm just doing the belly. And then I'll show you what to do when you get two colors that touch each other. For the base coats, we're just going to put a line here, so we have the white and then the brown, but then we'll make it more seamless later when we add some more of the fur. So there's my white base coat. We can add a little bit of the texture. We're going to use some of the brown, and I'll mix it with the white so that we get a nice light brown. And then I'll just add some little lines in here. That's a little too light, I can't really see it, so I'll do a little bit darker. And that is pretty dark, but it's okay because we're going to go over it later. Now our brown part has dried, so we can go ahead and add a second coat. With our second coat, we can actually use just the brown so that we get it nice and dark. I'm going to take my brush and wipe the extra paint off on my paper towel. I'm going to get some brown, just brown, and then I'm going to do some lines like we did before. And notice the length of the lines, so you don't want them to be super short, and they can be pretty long. And notice how I have my space between them. Now I'm going to wipe the extra paint off my brush, go right into the white, and I'm going to go between the ones I already did, overlapping some of them. And then now if I start really overlapping some of them kind of lightly when the paint kind of runs out on my brush, then that's going to blend it a little bit. So you want to have some lines that kind of stand out and some that blend in. I'm going to keep switching between the brown and the white until I have it how I like it. Once you get a feel for it and get a hang of it, then it'll be easy. And the good thing is you can just keep going over it over and over. So you can get in some really good practice, and in the end you'll probably have something that you like. If you get too much wet paint on here, then just let it dry and then you can go over it again. So this is pretty good for my fur right now. This is a small area, so I can also use my tiny brush. I have this little tiny brush. It's a number 0 round. I'm going to get it wet and then dry it on my paper towel so the bristles come together. And I'll just get a little bit of white with this, and then I can do some of these little hairs. The next thing is you want it to actually look furry on the back here. So see how it's just a perfectly straight line? Maybe if you put gel in his fur, but a natural bunny would have some little furs coming off the edge. So what I like to do for that is just get a little bit of brown and a little bit of white and mix them so that you kind of have your in-between color. And we're going to make a hair that comes out. We're not going out at an extreme angle, we're just going at a slight angle so that it comes out just very slightly, like that. And I can try like with a little bit of white. You'll find the color that, you know, works best for your painting. So it just comes out at a slight angle, and notice that I only have a few of them, so if you actually were to count them, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'll kind of blend them in with the rest of the back here. There. So that makes him look a little more furry on the back. I was also going to show you how to use a flat brush. I have this flat brush here. This is kind of big for this painting, but this would be a really good flat brush to use if you were doing something bigger. And then I also have this small flat brush, which would be good for this painting. A flat brush is really good because it's, if you look at it this way, it's a line, basically. So that's really good for a piece of fur. But also, again, it's really good for if you have a bigger animal or an animal with like really thick fur. And then this is a flat brush that I wanted to show you as actually a bad example of a flat brush to use. And here's why. If you look at it this way, look at how thick the bristles are. So it's not going to be flat and thin like this, how it was originally. This brush is kind of, you know, seen better days. It's kind of near the end of its life. It's pretty poofed out, and that would not be good for the fur. We're not going to use that brush. I'll use my small flat brush, my little teeny one. and I'm going to do some on the white. So I'm going to take this flat brush and I'm going to get some white on my brush. And when I get the white on my brush, I'm wiping it on my plate, because when you actually look at your brush, you don't want to have a bunch of paint on it. Like, you don't want it like this. If the paint's kind of gooped up on it, then it's just going to make really thick lines, and you don't want that. So you want to wipe your brush on your plate so that it's nice and thin, and then that's what you want to use for your fur. So then you want to hold your brush up like this at a 90-degree angle to your canvas, and then you can just make your little lines with the brush. And then, just like with the other brush, we're going to wipe the extra paint off. I'm going to get some brown. Actually, I'm going to mix white and brown since we're doing the white fur, so we don't want it to get too dark. And then I'm just going to do some little lines here for some shading. And then I'll rinse and dry my brush. So notice that these lines are kind of thick though. They make a good base, but then for touching up at the end, I can always do smaller lines with the smaller brush. And also, you know, since this bunny's little, then we want to have little lines, because he's going to have little fur. So I'm just getting my white and I'm doing my lines on here. And then for the shading, wherever you want to have your shading, then you can just do more of the darker furs where the shading is. So we can have a little bit of shading down here. So I'll get a little bit of the brown, just kind of mix it with the white in my brush, and then I'll just do some more of the dark furs down here. Wipe the extra paint off my brush. I'll get a little bit of white, go back between these. Alright, and then I will also do some of my little white fur that's coming off of here. Okay, so there is the belly. Then the other thing we're going to need to do is where this part, where the white meets the brown. For that, we're just going to get a little bit of brown, and we'll do some little lines that kind of come into the white here. So we're just going to overlap the white a little bit. And there we go. If you want, you can also get a little bit of white and do a few little white pieces there, just to kind of blend it a little bit better. And then right here, we're going to have white meeting the brown. So then for that, we can get the white and just make some fur that's going to come up and overlap the brown. But remember, we're always going in the direction that the fur would be, so the fur is going to be coming down like this. It's okay to make fur marks that go upwards, just as long as it's always, you know, in that same kind of curve. So I'm just going to do these, and I'm not putting a base coat on this one. So once you kind of get the hang of it and you do the basics, you know, in the steps I showed you, where you do the base coat and then you do the fur over it, then you can kind of use your own discretion. And, you know, if you're like, I don't really need to do a base coat, I'm just going to go right into the white, then you can do that. You know, you can kind of modify it as you see fit once you get used to it and you get a feel for it. Alright, there's some little white fur. And then he's going to have his little foot. So for these little parts like the foot, you don't really need to do fur detail on them. They're pretty small and not going to be super furry, so you can kind of just leave it whatever color. We are going to still want to add some of the brown. So I'll wipe the extra paint off my brush, and then I'll get a little bit of the brown, and I can just do some little lines in here, so that we show a little bit of shading. We don't want it to look flat. And then we can add a little more once it dries. then we would basically just continue that for the whole bunny. Alright, so that's pretty much it. That is how to paint fur. I hope this was helpful, and happy painting. And I'm just going to finish up this bunny so that he can look at his little star. And if you liked this, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you like these videos. And if you have any questions, then you can comment or you can email me, heather@heathercash.com. Thanks for watching.